with as many embellishments as you can. So let's start from my left.
I am Yair Landau. I spent better part of 20 some odd years in the video game, film, television, internet space. I built and ran Sony Pictures Digital Entertainment, where one of the businesses I ran was called Sony Online Entertainment. We had a little game that was successful for a while called EverQuest. Game we were very proud of and spent many lives on. Since I left Sony about 5-6 years ago, I've been an investor and a producer and director and in the online video space and the game space. I'm on the board of a company called Machinima. I'm on the board of a company called Playcast. I'm on the board of a company called Quark. And I have not accomplished anything near as great as either Erno Rubik or the guy who stood on the tube doing the Rubik's Cube. So I will hand it off.
This is quite a hard act to follow. I'm Paar. I look after mobile partnerships for Facebook in Europe. I was one of the early employees at Facebook in London and have been there a while. I nearly had my life ruined by EverQuest and just about survived, so thank you for that. I also was around with King in the early days, so I've watched the journey of Candy Crush Saga and kind of that whole story. That's me.
I am Michael O'Donnell. I'm the new CEO of Playcast, an Israeli-based video game streaming company. I live in the San Francisco area. I've been around video games and digital publishing and video streaming the last 25 years. So really excited to be here.
Okay, so since we're doing this for the audience and they need to decide whether to trust you very fast based on very little, one sentence, your favorite game?
Centipede.
It's really hard.
You've just wasted your sentence.
Quake 3 Arena.
That's good.
Quake 3.
Quake 3.
Can I still say Tetris?
Yeah. It's Russian, so it's fine. 2014 has been, well, it hasn't finished yet, but we've seen huge acquisitions. We've seen Oculus acquired. We've seen Twitch acquired. Is this something that's going... I'm not forgetting Minecraft. I'm still trying to analyze this, and wow, $2.5 billion. Is this a trend? Is this something that's going to be bigger and bigger, or is it just a one-off year? Yeah.
Well, I think that it's indicative of kind of the larger trend, which is basically everybody on the planet is a gamer. And nowadays, most everybody on the planet actually carries a gaming device with them 24 hours a day. And so this is just a natural evolution of that trend, which is the market is no longer defined by a narrow group of men sitting around playing hardcore games, even though the audience is still defined by a narrow group of men mostly. The reality is that everybody on the world stage can play now and plays actively and spends a great deal of their time, and so the size and scope of consolidation and acquisition and the whole scale of the business continues to grow.
I just want to add that I just read just now a friend explaining to his devastated children about the whole Minecraft acquisition that now the bogeyman runs Christmas.
And is it really a bogeyman? Do we still need to consider the large corporation acquiring the small companies as a bogeyman that's necessarily going to ruin them? Or is it something that, how can they, as developers, trust the big corporation to not ruin their product after very little time?
That's the ultimate challenge, and I just went through it myself personally about 9 months ago when our small software company was acquired by Citrix, a big multi-billion-dollar company. And on one hand, they're buying you for your brand, for your unique product and customer set, but they don't want to lose this magic sauce, but yet it's only natural that once you get acquired, you get restless in a big corporation and you want to go off and start another company again. So I think the most successful companies leave these brands alone for the most part, but support them with financial resources, a lot of the back office technology. And probably what you're going to see with Microsoft is take those 50 million plus Xbox customers and create a lot of synergy and cross-pollination. So it seems like that's our ultimate goal as starting companies, is get to a point where we can create a big exit or at least create value for our employees, for the investors. But I think the big companies are getting smart and leaving these independent brands. I don't know how much Facebook has touched Oculus or just left it alone for now.
Yeah, so I think that there was this common trend before that, a startup would be acquired and then it would disappear. And we've seen this time and time again. And I think Facebook is very conscious of this. And, you hire them for a reason. You hire them for their talent or their market or their brand or whatever it is. Why wreck that immediately? So the general philosophy for kind of Facebook acquisitions, it's true of Instagram, it's true of WhatsApp, it's kind of true of Paar, and it's definitely true for Oculus, is to leave them as close to independent as possible. And then, as was mentioned, leverage the things that we can help with: scale, outreach, partnerships, this kind of thing.
But, for example, Oculus were very vocal about not being able to accomplish what they want to accomplish without the infusion of the money by Facebook. And then again, we see companies like Oculus come to the crowd and say, invest in us. It's not really invest in us, it's invest in our future. Buy the products from us directly. So is it something, do we see the start of a corporation-free alternative path for those companies, or in the end it's going to be Mojang bought by Microsoft, Oculus by Facebook, Twitch by Amazon, Double Fine by Amazon?
Well, I think that's what's really interesting about the Oculus acquisition is you have a company taking a big step to back a platform even before it's launched. And what's really important in the game world, and has been true with every evolution of the platform, is what's critical is the game content that actually gets developed for the platform. The ultimate success of Oculus is really going to be about how many people write great VR experiences and how much the medium evolves based on how much software is developed. And I think what's kind of exciting actually about the Facebook acquisition of Oculus is all the money that is now streaming into creating software for that platform. So what you have is, in the case of Oculus, it was really a starter pistol on the whole VR space. I think it's very different than, say, the Minecraft acquisition, which is, hey, it's really hard to walk away from $2.5 billion. You can't blame them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Oculus acquisition was more than just a gaming platform. It was us looking at kind of a new paradigm of computing. We have mobile, and in a way, Facebook missed the boat there because it took us a long while to catch up. We don't have an operating system on mobile, and so we always play within the boundaries of Apple or Google or Microsoft. And this is a chance for us to define that platform. And, it might work, it might not, but it's an incredible team, incredible talent. The tech is leaps ahead of even the closest competitors, and so it seemed like a good choice.
Michael, as someone who is trying to create, as a CEO of a company that's trying to create a paradigm shift, do you envision it to be being able to do it without a huge corporation alone, or maybe by approaching the users themselves, or is it still going to be the path to acquisition, merger?
Today, we're going to leverage our size as an advantage. We can move very quickly. We can get a product out to market in weeks, if not days. But you still need the big distribution partners. So we are engaged with partners around the world who can bring us millions of households that are interested in a video game streaming service. So it really has to work both ways. A company like AT&T that might have 10 million households interested in a video game service, or a Comcast, or a Belgacom, or all over the world, they don't have gaming people inside those businesses. They're big, large, really distribution hubs. They need the talent in this room to create the kind of technology and create it in warp speed. So they really lean on each other, and it's a great ecosystem. We need the big distribution hubs that are already there. Of course, they're changing their technology very quickly. They're trying to adapt to multiple devices. very quickly. So I'm seeing the large companies reaching out to the smaller startups to really get advice, opinions, and even their product offerings.
Okay, let's talk a bit about mobile gaming. Mobile has exploded in the past few years. Playcast is still not very there. Facebook, obviously, very much there. Thank you for the Candy Crush. Yeah. Is on one hand we see breakout developers like Rovio, like King, making their huge game on mobile. On the other hand, we almost don't see it on consoles yet. We see few far in between examples of breakout hits on the consoles. Is this because the console is becoming less important than the mobile, or is it because it's still far, far more difficult to develop for?
Yeah, I think it also speaks to what was said at the start. Like, we all now carry a capable gaming device in our pockets, and that's unlocked a huge market that before was just, they wouldn't cross that barrier to buy a machine, put it under their TV. And so the time to market has reduced massively, and so it kind of opens up the space for innovation.
I think that what's really exciting about mobile gaming is actually the fact that you can mention very successful large-scale developers from anywhere in the world. I think that's been a really big transformation, where the console industry has historically been dominated by developers and publishers in the United States and Japan. And some of that was really about the cost, and you needed a large team of people and tens of millions of dollars, and a game like Destiny, which did ship 500 million units. It also cost $500 million to make and market. The beauty is that any half dozen guys can actually develop a pretty phenomenal mobile game and get it to market. And that's actually, since this is the Israel Gaming Conference, I think that's a real challenge. Actually, Israel needs to have a leading mobile game developer. It's been very hard to build serious console development and publishing here. It's very cost intensive, it's very labor intensive, but there's a lot of very specific aspects and a lot of talent in the community here, and I think it's just a question of time before you get a pop here from a company in Israel that becomes the next King or the next Supercell or the next Kabam. I mean, you're talking about a handful of mobile companies that 5 years ago were irrelevant. Now you basically have spin-off teams from Rovio that have started literally a dozen different mobile game companies.
So when you approach an Israeli game developer who says that his biggest dream is to be on the Xbox and PlayStation, you tell them to abandon this dream and try for mobile because it's easier and can get you faster to where you want to go?
I don't tell anybody to abandon their dreams. I tell everybody to pursue their dreams. But I think that developing a mobile game can be a step in that dream, right? I mean, if you look at the evolution of Angry Birds and Clash of Clans and Candy Crush, they're multi-platform games. And so the question becomes, if you can really introduce a pretty fantastic piece of IP in mobile, that there's no reason why it can't evolve and become a true multi-platform brand, and you can have a very graphic-intensive, much longer gameplay version of that IP ultimately find itself onto console.
Yeah, I think I agree. Like we've lived in this world where we're used to kind of ported smaller versions of a console hit coming to mobile and the experience not being great. I think we're going to move to a world where the opposite happens, where the first game, the hit game, is on mobile, and then you see a bigger console game.
Well, Facebook are really some of the experts in creating that viral sensation. I think that's ultimately you can go right to the consumer and create that viral sensation that gets spread around, and it creates a lot of pull from the channel. So with the various algorithms, you'll raise higher in the search fields, or you'll have more leverage with some of the distribution outlets. Or it may give you leverage for your next game. So maybe your first game, you're just an independent self-financing that game. The next game, one of the big publishers will want to step in and strike a licensing agreement, and maybe at some point want to acquire the entire studio.
Is it more skill or luck these days?
It's the billion-dollar question. But I think that I mean, it's an incredible challenge, and there is no kind of magic solution or silver bullet. There's no secret that suddenly you discover and then you have it, unless you're Flappy Bird. That's a bit sketchy.
PewDiePie is the secret there.
But I think that the companies that do well, I mean, if you look at companies on Facebook that do well, King, Israeli companies like Plarium, Playtika, Playtech, they operate their games almost as services. So, they used to, I come from the console world as well, back in the days, and there was this big inflection point, right, where your game takes off or it dives. And with mobile, with the web, with constant release cycles, you can remove that risk. You can constantly be iterating on a title, adding more content, doing promotions, that kind of thing. And so it doesn't necessarily matter so much these days if you don't have your hit in week one, you can find it later. And there is stories like this.
It's better to be lucky. I mean, it's really hard. It's really mobile development is very, very challenging, and both Apple and Google are actually very, very difficult to get featured on and promoted, and week one launch is really challenging. I think Facebook is actually one of the dominant platforms in terms of app install today, but it's really expensive. And so a lot of getting recognized and really breaking through is having enough resources to be able to buy the installs to drive the virality. It's easier than ever to develop, but it's harder than ever to get to actually break through and get discovered. And at the end of the day, it is about a killer satisfying experience. Kim Kardashian's Hollywood is very popular because people are having a good time playing, and that's why they're spending money. It's not just because she's Kim Kardashian. It's because people actually enjoy playing the game.
But one of the reasons, to play a devil's advocate for a bit, that Google and Apple are so difficult is the huge amount of scams, the huge amount of games that try to swindle money from you, the huge amount of bad product. Do you think that this industry can self-regulate, or will it be the job of gatekeepers such as Google, Apple, Facebook to some degree, to stop those and to, as a byproduct, stifle some of the innovation?
We, last April, we made a bunch of changes to our APIs, and we announced them at F8. And I was kind of involved in the run-up to that, and it was a ton of work. And one of the best things that ever happened in the week after F8 was we found this hacking, scamming site where these kind of hackers were analyzing the changes, and they were like, oh shit, now I can't sell Facebook data on like the black market. And it was wonderful. It was like a big success. So I think that there is a burden of responsibility on the platforms to protect consumers, protect users from this kind of thing. And developers, in my experience, always take the shortest path to money when they can. So we really encourage developers to just focus on user experience, and that's what we'll reward through our editorial channels, the way that we can promote apps. And I think that, as was mentioned, like a good user experience is its own reward, and that promotes virality and promotes the game.
I guess I'd like to challenge that notion that we need Google and Apple policing the internet for the population. Okay, I think that one of the great, and apologies to any giant Google fans or Google employees here, but the days of don't be evil are long gone. Okay, when you're policing people's access and to data, you're not in the don't be evil business. It's a very fine line between Microsoft and Google and with all due respect, Facebook. When you reach that level of scale, you do have a huge amount of responsibility to the population, but you know what? The internet still needs to remain free of people who basically manage your experience. So yes, the internet is filled with people who are scumbags, and the internet is filled with people who are fantastic, just like the real world, right? And yes, the real world gets policed, but where you draw that police boundary and what we get access to and don't get access to is a really important thing. EverQuest was a population of 400,000 active players. We'd have 150,000 people playing simultaneously. We had a lot of really bad actors in that space, and we'd have to get involved and manage that. But you don't want to restrict people's existence just because they're bad actors in the space. I think it's a very tricky thing.
But again, I'm fine with this being left here without your comment.